Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, sponsored by the Draft Professors. I am joined today by two of the draft professors that I love to listen to, Owen and Jack. Jack, good morning from across the Atlantic Ocean. Are you going to be able to watch the Super Bowl live today?
Yes, I will be. I'm probably going to have a nap beforehand because it starts at 11:30. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I need a bit more sleep afterwards, but quite jealous of those of you who get to watch it at a normal time, or my brother who's in Australia who's watching it at 9:30 in the morning, which feels quite nice. Yeah, I think that the Brits definitely lose the time zone battle on the Super Bowl.
And Owen, it's a different time for you to be on a Draft Professor podcast. I appreciate you filling in for Devin Jackson. How are you doing on this fine Super Bowl Sunday?
You know, I feel better now after hearing that. I thought the whole argument between, because I'm on the East Coast and we're always like, oh, East Coast time zones suck compared to West Coast time zones. Imagine being able to watch your favorite team at 9 in the morning when you first wake up instead of having to wait till like noon or 1. And you're like, yeah, no, 11:30 at night. That's when we're gonna have to start. And I'm like, that's insane.
Yes, and that's the definition of fandom, right?
Yes.
Like if you're going to rearrange, take a nap so that you can watch the big game. So, ironically, the Buffalo Bills could have done the funnest thing today because today is actually my 53rd turn around the sun.
Happy birthday!
So, I was really hoping for the best birthday present ever, but that got foiled about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But we are here to talk about Frankenstein wide receivers. And this was an idea that was presented by Jack several weeks ago. Jack, do you want to explain to everybody about Frankenstein wide receivers and what the concept for this podcast is?
Yeah, sure. So the idea is pretty simple. So it's basically kind of build your perfect receiver out of the 2026 wide receiver prospect. There's various different categories that we're going to kind of pick. We'll pick a player for each category. You can't pick a player more than once, so you can only pick them for one specific category. And the idea is that by the end of it, you have the kind of perfect wide receiver prospect that takes the best out of all the different guys in the class.
Okay. And Owen, what are the evaluation criteria that you specifically use on your grading scale? And then I'll pivot back to Jack and he'll share his, which is what we're going to use for the podcast.
Yeah, so just to break mine down pretty simply, the first category is route running. That mostly covers like your diversity in routes to run and ability to run them at a specific level. Catch radius, combination of your height, elevation, body control, being able to adjust the ball in the air, and where providing the radius that you can go up and get the ball for your quarterback in general. So it ties a lot into the contested catch area. Big play ability, that's your athleticism, ability to create big plays, both pre and after the catch. Just overall, just speed, explosiveness. Then we have hands, kind of self-explanatory. Separation ability, which is a little bit different than route running, and big play ability, kind of a combination of the two, where it's how well can you run the routes and how well can you utilize your athleticism or your physicality to create separation. It takes in a lot more elements of that, so you can cover a wider range of different body types and different styles of players. Release, kind of self-explanatory. Competitive toughness, this encompasses blocking, ability to use your physicality, ability to be able to handle physicality from corners. More so, just not being the dainty, diva receiver. Can you be the guy that is going to be, punching the mouth, kind of a dog out there? Versatility, inside, outside, ability to get gimmick touches, be able to use the ball after the catch, or use strictly a possession receiver, pre-catch, things like that. Rack ability, going to be how well you can make with the ball out of your hands, the athleticism you can gain past that, transition from receiver to runner, moves you can make, ability to make guys miss. A lot of that is factored into that. And then football IQ, ability to work off your quarterback when he escapes the pocket and needs to have more of a chemistry with you, or the ability to also find the holes in zones, understand your job as the receiver to help make your quarterback's job that much easier. So those are my 10 criteria I usually grade receivers on.
Okay. And then, Jack, I think your list was a finer set of criteria, and that's what we're going to use to kind of frame the podcast around. What are your evaluation criteria for wide receivers?
Yeah, so I've kind of picked out the key ones. I also have 10. There are a few that I'm not gonna that we're not gonna go through on this one because they may be a bit more of like the finer points. So the ones we're not going to include are mental processing, competitive toughness, blocking, and kind of body control. But then that's kind of looped into a different category. So the 6 categories that we're going for are athletic ability, play strength, release, route running, hands, and then after the catch. So yeah, all my kind of grading scale stuff is based off for anyone who's ever done the scouting academy, it's kind of based off the kind of criteria they have, modified slightly. So those are the 6 criteria that we're going to go with today. So athletic ability, play strength, release, route running, hands, and after the catch.
Okay, so Owen, for play strength, which wide receiver in this draft class represents play strength to you the best?
This is one of the ones that was toughest for me because you want to factor in, some of the run blocking elements of it. You also want to factor in having a guy that can play through contact and be able to fight through that and be able to win. I'm going to pick here, and this isn't something I think of immediately when I go to him, and maybe you have some other ideas. This will probably be where our first disagreement comes through. But because of the way I interpreted this a lot, I'm going to go with Elijah Surratt from Indiana. For me, the reason I go with him for play strength is I've been saying this, and that's why I have him as like my dying the hill player for the Bills at 26, is he has this elite ability to, when he's one-on-one covered and the corner is being physical and trying to take away leverage, he is able to have that chemistry and the ability to work through the player's body and have that back shoulder open all the time, no matter what the level of blanket coverage he's at, where he's able to come back, play through, and fight through guys to win that leverage battle and get open for his quarterback, especially if you have chemistry with him. So he has like this elite ability with the back shoulder. And then when it comes to the short intermediate route running, he's able to utilize that physicality to get guys off him, especially if they want to be physical at the stem, use that 6'3" body to then create some minor separation in that area and then block out or box out, using the basketball term, that catch windows. That way, even though there isn't a ton of separation yardage between two of them, he is still an open frame to hit. So he's a guy that I saw play strength and thought that kind of fits the mold for what I'm looking for at a wide receiver overall, not just run blocking.
Jack, any thoughts on Surratt's play strength and who your favorite for play strength is?
So like Owen, that this was a category I found kind of difficult to pick. Surratt was one of my honorable mentions for this. He was definitely in contention. I think he's your classic kind of strong-handed, physical receiver. I really like him as kind of your possession receiver at the next level. I don't know for me if he's necessarily kind of a downfield X, but that kind of physicality, toughness, the concentration when working over the middle of the field, I think is excellent. I ended up it was a bit of a coin flip between 2 guys, to be honest, which was Chris Bell from Louisville and Malachi Fields from Notre Dame. Now, I'm probably leaning Fields, which I'll be honest, I'm lower on Fields as a prospect, quite a lot lower than I am on Bell. But I think the one thing he does to a really, really high degree is the kind of play strength point. He's 6'4", 218. He's a big guy and he plays to that size. The ability to weather contact through the route, I think, is really impressive. He is not going to be fazed by kind of physical DBs. You see him kind of clear punches at the line when he's dealing with press. And he can fight through that contact early in the route, which I think one of the things a lot of receivers in this class struggle with is that ability to kind of maintain the red line when they're getting physical coverage. You see some physicality after the catch. I don't think he's necessarily a big creator, but he's tough to bring down and he'll fight for extra yardage. And again, he brings it as a blocker, not necessarily the most technically refined blocker by any stretch, but I think you see the strength there and the ability to kind of get DBs moving in the wrong game. Catch point strength, I think he's probably the best contested catch guy in the class, or certainly in the conversation for it. That ability to high point the football and come down with it despite contact at the catch point and despite guys trying to play through him if he's working back to the ball, I think he does a really good job. So as much as I'm maybe lower on him than consensus, as an overall prospect, for me, Fields is a really good example of play strength in a wide receiver.
Okay. And then, Jack, what trait do you want to discuss next to build your perfect wide receiver?
I suppose you could go with another one that's just like the physical skill set. We'll go with athletic ability. So for me, this one, again, there was a couple of guys in contention. Honorable mentions, Eric Rivers from Georgia Tech, who I think is brilliant. I think he's going to kind of get some more buzz at the combine, assuming he runs. KC Conception, like he's, again, another one, but the guy that I feel like it was difficult to ignore for this one is Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State. I just finished watching him and doing a final write-up on him this week. He is your archetypal small but fast receiver. Ran a 10-18 in the 100-meter dash in high school, so he's a legitimately quick track athlete. The ability to win downfield, I think, is excellent. His production was good this year, but if you go watch the games, especially the Florida game, there were a number of times where he's just completely open downfield and either doesn't get a ball or the ball is not delivered in a good state from the quarterback. So I think he is your typical take the top off the defense kind of vertical threat. I think his ability to stop and start, though, I think is also really impressive and underrated. He's more than capable of winning on the vertical plane, but you do see moments where he will use route tempo variations to manipulate DBs. He's really sharp on his cuts. Mississippi State gave him a pretty limited route tree, very much like that kind of air raid, like vertical tree, lots of hitches, comebacks, go routes, posts, that sort of thing. But you see it when he's working back to the quarterback, that ability to sink and then break back, I think is really impressive. So for me, it's Thompson. Like I said, there's a couple of other guys in contention, but I just think that kind of blazing speed for me is something that defenses are going to have to account for on every snap.
Yeah, I like that shot, especially because that's like the thing with him, right, is his speed. And another guy who I wanted to call out just for an honorable mention here that I'm probably not going to go with because I interpret this a little bit different was Malik Benson from Oregon. He ran like a 10.4 in the 100. He's another guy where his whole shtick is just get down the field. He's 6'1", 185, your typical like deep threat type of receiver, who I've done very little watching of, which I don't kind of want to talk about as much because I still need to do my final write-up on him. But who I'm going to go with, and the reason I'm going to go with this player is that I factored in more than just kind of straight line speed. I looked at more of the stop-start acceleration combined with their frame and how that impacts with their body type. And it's a player that we've already kind of mentioned already. I'm going to go with Chris Bell for my athleticism because not only is this guy able to – he ran a 12.4 in the 100-yard dash. Now, as someone who worked in a scouting department for college football team, that is one of the most important things for determining whether or not you're going to recruit a kid. Is if they're sub 13 in the 100-yard dash, that usually means they're going to be a college recruit or they're going to be recruitable. You want sub 12 to be more elite. 10.4 and 10.1 are ridiculous, even especially if you know track times. That's just insanity. But 12.4 is still nothing to scoff at, especially when it comes from a guy who is 6'1", 6'2", 220 plus pounds, and is able to turn that up and get upfield, accelerate like that level of movement. And he has some wiggle. He has the ability to stop and start, make guys miss. And that athleticism then translates into kind of this more running back-esque type body build where he's able to play through contact and still keep that level of athleticism going and be able to make guys miss both with agility as well as with his physicality while at full speed. So he's a guy that, while I don't think he's like the number one athlete in the class, there's some other guys that I also would have considered here, but I was looking around for some higher or for them for some other categories. I do think that his blend of athleticism with his size makes me want to go with him for this specifically because I think that's going to pair well with play strength and being able to utilize it all together, where some of these other guys are more fast in a straight line, but are lacking that kind of mass and are more so just the one note type of athlete, where I was looking for more well-rounded. Who do I like overall as like the best overall well-rounded athlete in this class?
Jack, any thoughts on Owen's selection of Chris Bell there?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that completely. His speed for his size is crazy. I remember watching him last summer. I think it was the Clemson game, where like some of the plays he made after the catch, just in terms of that speed at that size, there's not many guys who move like that. And I think, he's definitely one of the better ones. I'll be interested to see how he recovers from was it torn ACL?
Yeah, in December.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how he looks as a rookie, depending on how much he plays. But I think he's a really exciting player.
One of the plays I think that epitomizes him is that run after catch touchdown against Miami this past season when they surprised and upset them. Like, if you want to distill Chris Bell down to one play, him coming out of the slot, being physical to get some separation, catching that, and then splitting two defenders, shaking another one, and then breaking the third tackle before getting the end zone by just pulling away from other guys, that's like the epitome of like what you're getting from Chris Bell as a player overall. And that's where I kind of put my eggs into the basket of, ACL recovery has been advanced technology at this point, and now you're looking at a player that you can get back to that level of athleticism. I can work with that and implement that in so many other places in my offense. So that's where I was kind of leaning forward at this point.
Yeah, I think the instant speed is what really stands out, especially on that play. It's that ability to just so quickly go from 0 to 60. Like, there is a lot of those guys at that size that get a reputation for being quick tend to be like build-up speed guys. But his acceleration for his size it's freaky.
Yeah.
Okay, so Owen, what is the next trait that you want to add to our Frankenstein wide receiver?
So to kind of also touch on the comments that Anthony's putting in here, we talk about hands, because that's what I factor into hands as well, is going to be some of that contested catch stuff and the ability to win consistently, not have drops for one, obviously. That's the obvious one. But also being able to have that catch radius, be able to win through contact and win in contested catch situations, whether it's going to be going above the rim or it's going to be over the middle in crowds. There's a couple of guys in this class that are actually really good at this. The reason why I didn't have like Surratt for this option for me right now is that I think that when it comes to, as Jack was mentioning, down the field, going up above the rim, he's not my favorite. And that was kind of my criticism of him coming out of the summer. But I felt like he evolved as a player a lot more than relying solely on that. Then you have your Malachi Fields that we touched on earlier, who does that really well. I think for me, I'm going to go with Denzel Boston from Washington. Has the size, the ability to go up and get it with the length he has. But there's been a lot of discourse. So I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, and whenever we talk about first-round receivers, there's always the name of Boston being floated around, and the criticism is I don't want to pick another Keon Coleman at 26. Like that, we already saw that failed. Why would we want that for this offense? And I would say that the difference between the way Boston wins, which is way more consistent when it comes to winning at the catch point, winning above the rim, is that he operates a lot more with technique and trying to win with at the catch point with being more of a basketball box out type as opposed to Keon Coleman or some of these other guys that are just bigger, stronger, faster than some of these other players where they just try to out athlete the corner to the ball and like look over the top of him off his back, really take less ideal angles to the ball in the air, but still be able to come down and win it because they are just that greater of an athlete. And we see that now with Keon Coleman and some of these other guys who thrive exclusively on contested catches, that once you get to the NFL, these corners, they're better athletes. They're the best athletes you're going to be facing on a game-to-game basis compared to what you were facing in college. So a guy like Boston who takes the angles, has the length naturally already to him, and then tries to box out the DB and attack the ball in more of a smart, intellectual way as opposed to just relying solely on his size is what I really like when it comes to that level. And he's also consistent with his hands, goes over the middle, even when he was dealing with injury this year, tracking the ball down the side of the field or down the sideline and be able to make adjustments to the sideline are good. I think another sneaky option here would have been maybe Deion Burks, because he's one of the guys that, like, despite being super small, has some of the best body control I've seen from a small receiver. But I felt like the size and contested catch one-on-one stuff with Boston led me more to picking him than Deion Burks.
Okay. Jack, what do you think of Denzel Boston, and who is your pick?
I really, really like that, not least because that is also my pick. There's three guys. So in terms of the way I grade traits, it's on a 1 to 7 scale. Again, this is a scouting academy thing, but 7 being elite, and it's rare that a prospect will get a 7. Any prospect at kind of anything really, you'll get a few each kind of position group, each class. I have 3 receivers in this class with a 7 or an elite grade for hands, which is Boston, Makai Lemon, and Kyle Tate. I think it's kind of similar to what Owen was saying. Like, I considered Makai Lemon at this spot, but again, if we're factoring things like body control and that ability to kind of win contested catches consistently, I think Lemon plays above his size and his weight at the catch point, but I don't think he's going to be some kind of body control contested catch monster at the NFL level. Whereas I think Boston, for me, I think is much closer to that. I think his ability to come down with the football, the footwork he shows as well, I think particularly in terms of getting his feet down in bounds, I think is really impressive. He just has that kind of innate feel for where he is in relation to the sideline, and the kind of concentration to make those tough grabs. I just think, soft hands, tracks the ball really well downfield. Like you'll see late hands from him as well when he's working downfield. He's not going to kind of telegraph it so the DB can break up the pass. When he's used underneath, again, you see really good concentration and kind of toughness. There's no fear of contact when he's bringing the ball. So, echo what Owen said. I think, for me, Boston is the choice here.
Okay. So we've gone through 3 of the 6 traits at this point. Jack, what is the next trait you wanted to discuss?
We'll go release, I think. So I think for me, so in terms of kind of when I'm grading this will kind of encompass, how quickly a guy accelerates off the line. In terms of when he's working, like how does he work against off coverage? How does he work against press? Does he have, if he's against off coverage, does he have the speed to kind of eat up that cushion quickly and kind of get the defender to flip their hips? If it's against press, can he clear his chest? Can he win with kind of avoiding contact? Can he win with hand fighting? Can he just win with pure strength? So there's a bunch of things that kind of go into this. It's not simply like how dancey a guy's feet are at the line. For me, this is Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M. I think maybe he's not the biggest, and I do get that, but I think his quickness, I think, is incredibly impressive, and you see him use that to his advantage at the line of scrimmage. I think his ability to win with technique, footwork, get DBs on their toes, get them to flip their hips early, I think is excellent. I think he showed the ability to use his hands at the line to clear jams and kind of get his chest clean. So I see a guy who, when he's against press, I think he can win with technique, with footwork, with quickness, with elusiveness, but I think he can also win when needed with his hands. And then I think in terms of the ability to win against off coverage, you see that instant acceleration and that suddenness in terms of his ability to kind of change direction. You will see him routinely kind of varying his stem, whether it's in terms of route tempo or whether it's kind of attacking leverage through the release when he's working against off coverage. That is the kind of thing that you just see corners just not knowing what to do. Do they flip their hips because he has the speed to win deep, or do they sit? I just think he is incredibly well-rounded in that. Like I say, he could probably get a little bit stronger, but I think the technique is there, and that ability to win versus press and versus off has him as my choice here. There are a couple of other guys I would have considered, one of whom I may have gone with if I didn't have him for another category that we're going to have coming up. So I think some honorable mentions. I think CJ Daniels from Miami, I like a lot in terms of his release package. Chris Brazel, I think, from Tennessee. I feel like Tennessee wide receiver, I've seen this a lot over the last couple of weeks. Tennessee wide receivers get a bad reputation, often justifiably because of that offense in terms of the NFL projection. But Brazel is far more technically refined than the guys who've come out of Tennessee previously. Just watch the Georgia game and see how he works his releases there. So he's, another guy that I like there.
So, what do you think of Casey Concepcion's release package, and then who is your pick for the receiver with the best release package?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect pick because that's going to be the pick I'm going to go with. I'm not the biggest fan of projecting Concepcion to the outside, not because he doesn't have a great release, but my problems with that come with when he gets to be when physical corners can get into him a bit down the field. I remember when he was playing. I believe he was the one who transferred from one of the other NC State from NC State exam. I remember him playing in games where he was the one who was putting DBs in the backfield. Like he plays way above his weight class with that. And is able to use that physicality more so than a small wide receiver should. It's kind of the same issue I have with some of the other contested catch guys, where it's like, okay, you can play physical, you can out physical guys at this level despite your size limitations, but at some point there's going to be a flattening of the curve where everyone's going to be in the same athletic or play strength kind of thresholds. And can you continue to do that once you have that raise in? So it makes me a bit concerned, and also I like just having a guy who can create as much as he can in space, in more space out of the slot. I'm not saying he can't be an outside guy, but I feel like his best success would be in the slot. But everything Jack did say, I agree with, and I do think that he could be a guy, Stephon Diggs-esque, where he's outside and he's smaller than the average receiver, being sub 6 foot, but you do have the ability to utilize your technique with your footwork and your hands, have the explosiveness to keep DBs honest, and then once they try to press you, if you are able to swipe, keep your chest clean, and get a free release to the outside, you can then get off the line a lot faster than them, and now they're on the back foot. So he has the athletic capabilities and the technique on the outside to really test DBs and make them have to either give him that cushion, and then now he's operating that space that I wanted for him, or he's creating his own space if he can win off of that line. Like I said, the only thing I'm concerned about is like the elite corners that can really use their physicality at the stem to really attack him. But that's something that's going to be opposite for me than release. That's going to be more route running than anything, or competitive toughness. So for a guy just strictly coming off the line of scrimmage, being able to create that early separation to get into your route running aspects, I do think that is what where I'd go with Concepcion for that category.
Okay, and Owen and Jack, I think this is actually a really good question here from Anthony. Can you distinguish between release and route running? Owen, you just touched on it, but do you want to elaborate just a little bit more?
Yeah, so release, there's a lot of differences when it comes to release and how DBs play you in the route, where when you're on the line, the DB, if he's going to press you up, he's trying to jam you up so that way he gets your rhythm and timing off with your quarterback, causes you to take extra time to get off the line, extra steps, because a lot of these passing concepts are tied to how the quarterback takes his 3 or 5 step drop if he's under center, or his progression timing when he's in the shotgun. And if you're not into your route, or you're not taking the correct angle, if you're getting rerouted to not having to take an outside release when you were supposed to take an inside release, it can mess up the entire play as a whole. So they're trying to just get you to take extra time at the line of scrimmage to beat them before getting into your route. Whereas route running, more so, you're trying to use your ability in space to manipulate the DB, have him get off of you while also creating space for your quarterback to put the ball in. So you can use physicality at both spots. You can use athleticism at both spots. But the different techniques and the way that you're utilizing them is once you're in the route and you're utilizing route running, you're already kind of in phase. You're just trying to manipulate DB to get yourself more open. Whereas the release is more focused on getting off the line and getting into the process of running the route in flow, as opposed to the two kind of being the same kind of thing, because there's different techniques and different ways that they impact how the route is going to go, as opposed to them being more tied together.
Jack, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great description. I think the thing for me is like I'd see, your release is kind of tells you a lot about where you can be deployed, and then your route, like you can be a great route runner, but if you're not able to release against press, like you can still be a great route runner from the slot. So like a good example for me would be like Makai Lemon, who I really like. I have as my wide receiver 2 in this class, but like Lemon, I think is an excellent route runner, and I think he's crafty at the line in terms of his release package. But if you put him against press, he's going to struggle. So he's got that way to win in terms of, you see the craft that you see in the routes, you see in his release, but he's not necessarily versatile enough to win with physicality and kind of craft and creativity. So I think you can be good at one and not the other. You'll also see a lot of the time those bigger guys who maybe win more with just kind of catch point ability. They're often decent at the line because they're either able to win with physicality and hand fighting, but they don't have the separation ability that comes with the route running later. So they're often linked, but I think they can be separate.
See, I like that because I was actually going to say I thought Makai Lemon would be the great example of somebody that could do one route running, but not necessarily be good at the other. And that's why, from a grading standpoint, you separate them. So that was what was going through my mind.
Yeah, I like to say I like Lemon a lot, but it is that kind of thing of, if you graded them together, it's then difficult to see, okay, what role does that guy play? Just looking at that, whereas by having a route running grade and a release grade, you can see, okay, he's a good. Once he gets out into the route, he's good. Or, if he's got a free release, you can see how he works. But then, okay, but if he can't win versus press, then it kind of doesn't matter how the route is.
That's what kind of makes Casey Concepcion such a unique prospect, is that like he has the play style and the typing in space and with his routes that you'd expect from like a slot guy. But he has some of the more advanced stuff on the outside that differentiates him from an Antonio Williams or him from a Zachariah Branch type player.
Yeah, and then I was actually – so this is me from the outside looking in. But if all wide receivers are evaluated as wide receivers, right? It's not like you have a slot wide receiver position on your board and an X wide receiver on your board. Every wide receiver is just on your board. It's a wide receiver evaluated on the same criteria. But if you were evaluating role specific, where if my team needs an X, I'm going to evaluate them as an X, then like would there be such a concept as, do you think like an NFL team is going to say we have a way to grade X wide receivers and a way to grade slot wide receivers, and they would use different scoring criteria on them?
I think, like potentially, although I think part of the thing, and I'm literally, I should have it out in the next couple of days, so this is a good plug. I've got an article coming about kind of the slot receiver and how it's kind of changed over recent years. I think part of the challenge now, and the reason I don't have it broken down into different archetypes, whereas I do at other positions, right? So I have a corner grade, and then my nickels are graded slightly different in terms of the traits are the same, but they're weighted different because I think the roles are different, and you are often a nickel in the NFL or you're an outside corner. Whereas I think what we're seeing now with the NFL is it's very rare you've got those true slot guys. So like Zay Flowers, for example, I think he like 5'8" or 5'9". He played less than 50. I want to say it was less than 50% of his snaps in the slot last year. Calvin Austin plays a load. He doesn't play as much in the slot as you would think for a guy who's like 5'8", 175. So I think with the way these guys are being aligned, whether it's using stacks and bunches and things like that, teams are getting more creative with how they align them, and they want guys who can kind of do a bit of everything. So for me, I kind of have that universal grade in the same way as you get your, what we would have traditionally called your traditional X. A lot of times now, teams are lining them up in the slot because they can kind of get the two-way goes, they can get the free releases. So I think for me, the way that these guys are aligning now means that I want a guy who can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think when you separate that grading, when you try to focus on a slot receiver's skill set versus an outside receiver skill set and then grade them more individually, I think you're going to get a lot more discrepancy, and you'll be a lot higher on certain players that are slots only because you're like, oh, well, they're a perfect slot player, so I'm going to grade them high across the board on all their skills. And you're like, okay, cool, now they're like my 12th overall player because they graded so highly independently of what they are. But in reality, because you're not factoring in how versatile they can be in an offense, they're exclusively a slot guy, that's not going to go how high he's going to go or how high he should be rated, because you're looking for more. The higher up your board, the more you want a guy to be able to do for your team. If he's just a specific role type player, that's where you see guys fall, even though they're pretty good at that role. I mentioned Antonio Williams earlier, player I'm a big fan of, but I don't think he can play much outside of the slot, despite having, I think he's like 5'10". He's a bit bigger of a slot guy. And then in addition to that, you also have the power slots where, like Jim, you and I are Bills fans, the Joe Brady offense, the Sean Payton offense utilizes Deshaun Bailey, and they utilize big body 6'4" dudes in the slot because they want to get that guy space and free release off the line of scrimmage because they're not as explosive. They have more build-up speed, and you can get them on the smaller nickel corners. Like you can match up stuff like that. So even when looking at players who have a higher percentage of their snaps going out of the slot, like Jack was saying, you have a wide variety of the types of players that can be in the slot. So just grading them across the board first, and then having them, then you kind of talk about their role and their fit. And I'm sure NFL teams do this as well, where they will have them all graded identically. And then when it comes to, well, we really need a slot over an X. So all the receivers that we have graded in this section right now are all X's or Z's. So we don't really need to take a receiver at this spot. We can wait until we get to that part of the draft where we have our slots more adjustedly graded to. And that allows you to be more flexible with how you attack it on draft day, where you're not forcing it because you're like, wow, we have a highly graded slot receiver right here, but how do we really factor that in and compare it to the rest of the receiver class that's in right now? You do that already and then break it down afterwards.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that level of detail. I don't remember who I was going back and forth with. So, Owen, what is the next trait that we want to discuss?
Yeah, so we have two left between route running and after the catch. I'm going to go with route running because I've waited this long to talk about this guy, and he's going to be my route running guy. I don't think he's number one per se, because I do think there's some more stereotypical. It's not going to be Mekhi Lemon, even though I think he is one of, not the best, like pure route runner player. But factoring in athleticism, size, everything else to how they win with routes, and just because I want to talk about my wide receiver one in this class, I'm going to go with Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, a guy that has the size and has the athleticism to win down the field, as well as coming back towards the line of scrimmage, across the middle of the field, being deceptive with his head fakes and ability to loosen his hips and have DBs bite on double move on the outside. Is he one of the most diverse route tree? I don't think so yet. But for what you've asked him to run and the amount of talent and athletic ability he shows in those routes and the separation he can create on those routes, despite being a bigger guy who is more like, your 4.4s, 4.5 speed, straight line type of guy, he can still win over the top by being deceptive, by getting guys to bite. He can win over the middle by being physical. He can win coming back down the stem by having that stop and start. And he can also win in the more contested areas. So I do think for me, putting the whole package together as being a true complete receiver as a route runner, I love me some Jordan Tyson. I have, topped out grades at route running and separation for him, especially. Is he the most technical, pure, throw this on, they'll teach them in the wide receiver room type route runner? I don't think so. I think I'd go with Lemon, even like a Jeremy Bernard. Those are some of my favorite route runners in this class so far. But for me, Tyson, putting it all together into a full package with a bow, I think he's a guy that I love a lot to do that kind of stuff, on top of just being this physical dominant presence. So he's my wide receiver one. I need to find somewhere to talk about him. And it definitely, for hell, will not be hands. So it'll be
So, Jack, what do you think of Jordan Tyson selection by Owen, and then who is your pick?
Yeah, so Tyson was definitely one of the guys I was considering for this. I think he's, obviously a lot of the conversation around Tyson as a prospect is going to be about the off-the-field stuff in terms of the injuries, but when you actually watch him play, I mean, he is brilliant. He is a true 3-level separator. I think the ability to sink and kind of have those snappy cuts is really impressive. You do see him manipulate DBs as well, which I think is always a kind of a non-negotiable for me. If you're talking about route running, it's not just the variety. It's, are you giving these? Do you understand how to stress your competition? Do you understand how to work them? How to create space through more than just athletic ability? So he was definitely close for me. A couple of the other guys who, Mekhi Lemon was very close to being the pick here. I also think Eric Rivers again from Georgia Tech gets a shout out for this. He's lower on my board because of the fact he's tiny and he does have some injury issues, but he's a small, quick, really creative route runner. So I do like him. But the guy for me is my wide receiver one, and that's Carnell Tate from Ohio State. I think it maybe feels a bit like that kind of lazy thing of like, an Ohio State wide receiver, he can, he's a good route runner. But I wasn't that impressed with Tate when I watched him over the summer. I thought there were plays where he was maybe a bit lax with his routes. I think it was the Nebraska game or the Michigan game. I can't remember which last year, but there was one where he just kind of drifted completely on an out route, and it led to a pick. I think it was Michigan. But his growth in 2025, I think, has been excellent. He again, a bit like Tyson, he's not necessarily going to win the underwear Olympics of the combine if he does test. I don't think he's necessarily a low 4.4s athlete. He's probably like high 4.4s, maybe low 4.5s. Probably more like 4.5.1, 4.5.2, I think. But like for me, his ability to manipulate DBs and utilize his technique allows him to separate at all three levels. And that ability to win downfield, like it's not just are you quick and do you have the speed to blow past guys. You watch Tate and you watch like the Penn State game. There are multiple plays where you see him kind of using rocker steps and head fakes and kind of targeting blind spots to get these DBs to just wrong foot, and then he's gone and he's completely clear. So for me, yeah, it's close, but I think Tate's ability, whether it's like that ability to understand how to pressure DBs with kind of getting on their toes early in the route, whether it's manipulating at the break point, whether it's using his hands as well, which you see when he's working back to the quarterback, that ability to use his hands to kind of clear contacts at the top of the route. I think he's excellent. And for me, this is such an important trait for me in my grading, because I think Owen said earlier, like there are a lot of these guys who win with athleticism, and that's fine when you're either at high school or then at college, because there is that kind of curve. But when you get to the NFL, everybody else is like one of the best athletes in on their respective college teams when they were coming out, and so you have to be able to win with technique, not just your kind of athletic gift. So I think a guy like Tate, and I think Tyson as well, they're both well suited to winning at the NFL level because they've got that ability to win with craft, not pure traits.
Yeah, I think I went through the same kind of progress you did with Tate over the summer, where I didn't love a lot of what I saw. I thought he was like a high end number 2 kind of type receiver, because I felt like he did have some areas of his game that were kind of lacking. I do think he did take steps in the short to intermediate route running game this year, where I felt like he was that was where he was really lacking. I didn't think he had that quick separation. I do think his release helps him out with that a lot. For me, though, I think there's a player I don't think there's a player in this class that runs better deep routes at full speed, at full stride than Cardinal Tate, where, like you were saying, the head fakes, there are so many times you'll be watching him and the DB that is either a deep cover 3 or is on off man, and he takes and flips his hips to the outside as opposed to the in when it's a double move, a post corner, where Tate's just so good at making them read the wrong thing and then creating separation, where now he has 5 to 7 yards of separation down the field, wide open, even though a guy is supposed to be in his hip pocket the whole way because he's deceived him enough to make him think he's doing more of an outcut to come back inside. And it's all doing all that full stride, full speed, which makes him one of the best deep threats in his class, even though he isn't that level of speedster like we talked about with the athletic, with the with your guys that are going to run those like 4.4s, 4.3s, 4.2s. He's going to be a guy that can still win down the field, even though he isn't the fastest guy out there, because he is just so well at running those routes and deceiving corners in that level of space.
Yeah, and I think he's a great example of that thing where, like, if you listen to kind of wide receiver coaches and clinics and stuff, when they talk about being a good route runner, a lot of it comes down to that ability to sell every route. You need to sell the vertical plane regardless of what your route is, because you need to have that corner respecting that, so that then if you want to work those short and intermediate routes, that you then create the space. And yes, Tate is not the fastest guy, but that speed, I think, is evident, and that ability to sell that kind of verticality to his game, I think is really impressive.
Okay, so did you both have Tate for route running?
No, I went Jordan Tyson.
You went, I forgot that you went first. Okay. Okay, so the last criteria is hands, correct?
We're not after catch. We did hands already. Hands was Denzel Boston.
Excuse me, after the catch. I didn't scroll far enough. Right? That's the one that we haven't done?
It is indeed.
So, Owen, I'll let you take that one first.
Yeah, so the fun thing about this class is there's really 2 types of receivers. We have a lot of big body guys winning the outside, and we have a lot of slots that win the space. You can really separate yourself. The Tysons, the Tates, the Concepciones of the world are separating themselves because they can do a little bit of both, where we have a ton of guys that fit both categories pretty exclusively in this class. And I think there's a lot of options for this specifically because of that. Like, I'm a big Deion Burks fan, especially because of what he can do after the catch. We talked about Chris Bell earlier. Can't pick him for this, and I made that choice specifically because I wanted to go with somebody else for this role, and I'm going to go with Zachariah Branch from Georgia. Just a guy that when you're going to solo out a specific skill that he wins with, and what his superpower is going to be at the NFL. If he's going to be a guy that contributes to an offense, how is he going to do that? And it's going to be with the ball in his hand on those gimmick touches. Is he the most complete receiver in the world? No. But as a guy who can return kicks, return punts, have that level of space to be able to operate in that, or on bubble screens, crossers, be able to just get the ball in his hands at full speed in space, or with the DB trailing him and allow him to go out there and make a guy miss and try to get upfield and score. From any point of the field is all level fields threat to score a touchdown because of that ability, that where you have more guys in front of him, but he's going to make half of them miss and then outrun the other half. He's a guy that I think if he's going to make it in the league, it's going to be with that run after the catch, and I do think that he's a good chance to do that. It's more so, can he put together more of that stuff, or he's going to be exclusively a gimmick slot with return upside there. So Zachariah Branch is a player that has all these different traits I love in run after catch. But isn't maybe the most complete guy. Whereas, like, I think of Deion Burks or some of these other slot specific guys, I'm sure that Jack's going to mention can do a lot more than he can.
Yeah. So, Jack, who is your favorite after the catch wide receiver in this class?
So it was very close to being Branch, but I settled on Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana, who I think, so one of the things that I've got in terms of like some like advanced stat numbers, which I think say a lot about Cooper. So obviously PFF tracks forced missed tackles. If you look at forced missed tackles per reception, he's at 0.39, which if you compare that to wide receivers since 2014, that's 98th percentile. So pretty good. But I think what really stands out to me with Cooper is that ability to create after the catch when being used further down the field. So one of the things that I've got tracked in my prospect database is yards after the catch per reception of 10 plus air yards, because I think you'll get guys who maybe have high yards after the catch numbers, but a lot of that can be scheme touches. So, I mean, that's still very valuable. But I think if you can see a guy, sometimes you can see those guys who then can create when they're down the field. And I think that's really important. So for me, so he's averaging, which is kind of crazy, this number, 8.25 yards after the catch when he's getting a reception of 10 plus air yards, which is 87th percentile amongst wide receivers in that last decade or so. So I think what I really like about Cooper is he's not small. He's 204 pounds, but he's not necessarily the biggest. But his toughness and contact balance after the catch, I think, is excellent. His vision, which I think is something he shares with Branch, I think that vision and ability to kind of read like a running back when you've got the ball in your hands, he really shows that. He's not the same athlete as Branch, and I think that the thing with Branch for me is he's probably more of a home run threat than Cooper in terms of when he's got the ball. He's the kind of guy that you can get him out on a screen and he can just hit the open field and then he's gone. He's got that open field speed. Whereas Cooper for me is more of a. I've seen people throwing out the Debo comp, and I'm not going to go there because I don't think anybody is Debo other than Debo. But like that kind of toughness, gritty vision after the catch. So kind of different flavors, which I quite like about doing this, is like these are two very different types of after the catch creators. But Cooper was my choice, but I think I was like 50-50 on this one.
Okay, so I have a question that's kind of framing, and like this is coming out of Bill's Mafia, right? Because there's I guess there's a conversation of a player that wins in college because of contested catch. That's a skill that doesn't necessarily translate consistently. So these were the 6 categories. And there's 2 questions I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask one of them at a time to not confuse anyone. if there was one trait that somebody could live on, meaning that they really are, let's say, a negative with the other five, or they're below average with the other five, is there one of these, Jack, that you think somebody could win with at the NFL level if they lack the other five?
I think it's inevitably going to be tricky. It depends where the floor is on the other five. Like, if it's kind of adequate ability, then I think if you were very good at one of the others, potentially. The one that for me I think is the most important of these is route running. Athletic ability, I think we all get really excited about high-end athletes. It happens every year, especially when we get to the combine. We see these guys run quick 40. I mean, how many guys have we seen that have come into the league that have been speedsters that don't translate? I think play strength and hands, you can have great hands and strength at the catch point, but as you're kind of alluding to, like those contested catch guys, they might have a role, but they're not really going to be great contributors. I think route running is one of the ones that can often allow you to overcome some of the deficiencies in the other ones. Because if you're a great route runner, if you can keep yourself free, then you have to worry less about play strength. If you can win with technique, it can help overcome some athletic limitations. So, like, there's so many guys that we've seen over the years, right, who maybe not the most athletic guys, but their ability to consistently win as route runners allows them to create more separation than their athleticism would suggest. So, I think it depends how low the floor is on the other five, but I think if there is one that is the most important, for me, it has to be route running.
I would agree that to a point. I'm going to disagree in a second just for the sake of content, but I agree that route running is the most important of the five traits, especially if you can get that at a higher level and the other ones maybe can catch up or aren't at that level. It's fine. You can be an NFL receiver if you have elite route running or high level route running, and your hands are a bit suspect. You're not the most best at contested catch, or you're not the 4.4, 4.3 athletes. We've seen a ton of 4.5 athletes make it. You can definitely, even at worst case scenario, you're a slot guy because your release struggles and you're not the fastest dude and you're just getting open over the middle, and providing a somewhat reliable target if your hands are also suspect. But you're going to be open over the middle for your quarterback a lot. I do think, for me, the answer I'm going to go with, and this is more so because the way the question was phrased, which is, can you be dominant and or like succeed at a higher level? I'm going to go with after the catch, because there's going to be guys in the NFL level that maybe aren't the greatest athletes or struggle with more nuances of the game. But if they are that natural level of vision, they have enough athleticism to make it the NFL. So we're saying like average athlete. If you can you can define a role in an offense if you are elite after the catch, where they can give you gimmick touches. They can give you the opportunity to be in that slot because they want to get you on screens and have you working in the open field, because you can make guys miss and you can get up the field and make plays like that. So I'm a little bit cautious to say that because athletic ability is also kind of tied into that a bit more. But I feel like it's tied into all of these things, to be honest with you. So for me, when it comes to answer the question of where can you find a role with only one of these, I think after the catch, because it's going to be more gimmicky, it's going to be more having to be implemented for sure, but you can be more consistent with getting the ball, with being able to make moves. Now, then again, I saying that I hated like Makai Corley, who that was his gimmick, was he was all run after the catch, but struggled with route running, physicality, hands, all that stuff, and he didn't last long. But I think we could find names for someone who fits all of these categories that were high on one and an average or below average of the rest of them that we could throw out names about for hours. But for me, I think if you're going to try to find a position to make an NFL and be able to play a long-term career and have production, it's going to be making moves with the ball off the catch with your hands, either as a returner or as that element of the offense that they need from a short area behind the line of scrimmage type wide receiver for that offense, which every offense does utilize.
Okay. And then to build on that, so the opposite of that question would be if a player, so the 6 categories: athletic ability, play strength, release, route running, hands after the catch. If a receiver had 5 of those, but didn't really have the 6th, could they go in round 1 and be considered the best wide receiver of the class and have a successful NFL career, even if they were missing one of those? Owen.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky question, especially when you phrase it with can they go in the first round. I think with it, if a player has a big of a flaw as that, I don't know if they'd be in consideration for wide receiver one or first round type player. But you can definitely be a successful player. I think for me, that's kind of talking about like Elijah Surratt, where I don't think he has the high end athletic ability, but everything else he does in his game, when the nuance of the short intermediate, the physicality he plays with, and the ability to get upfield and be more of a handful to bring down, he's a guy that I think can hit on 5 of those 6 categories, and I'm calling for him to go to 26 for the Bills. There are a lot of players that I think that's a recipe to be a successful wide receiver in the NFL, because you don't need to be elite at everything. That's where you get like your Jamar Chases, your all those things. But for me, I think to be good to great at everything, but maybe not elite at one thing, or good to great at everything but have a flaw in your game, you're going to be a player that is going to make money in the NFL at that point, because you're able to do it. So if I had to pick one to not have, I would probably go. I think to be honest with you, if we're removing the first round element of it, I think athletic ability is the one that can come off the most, because you have everything else to your game, but you're a 4.5, 4.6 athlete at wide receiver. You can still make it in the league with being able just that you're going to be a 2 or a 3, but you'll make it in the league. You'll get a second contract. You'll be able to have an operation in that offense. Whereas like if you're high level athlete, but you're missing route running, you're missing after the catch, you're missing play strength or release or hands, you're going to have some people that are going to be struggling to find a role for you, or you're going to find teams that don't really value you because they want more well-rounded players if they're not going to be their number one.
Jack, your thoughts?
I don't think any of them necessarily on their own would prohibit you from being a very good player, but I think some matter more than others. So, like, I mean, this is probably a good one given that he's in the class. Like I've said, Carnell Tate's my wide receiver 1. I don't think he's very good after the catch. I mean, I wouldn't have him as kind of like I said, my grading scales are 1 to 7. I've got him as a 2 after the catch. Now, I'm kind of willing to overlook that because I think he does everything else well. And I think with most of those, I'd probably be willing to overlook one of them as a deficiency. I think some are more important than others. So I think route running, I'd find so in terms of my grading scale, without going too much into the weeds, each of them, the lower you score, like there's either a penalty or a kind of multiplier if you score at the extreme of one of them. Route running has, along with athletic ability, has the bigger penalty versus something like release or after the catch. Because after the catch, I think is really important. But I think if you're consistently getting open and you're winning, even if you're not creating after the catch, if you can be a big play threat downfield, I'm fine if you're not a great creator. Same with release. Like we've talked about examples of guys who maybe they're not going to win on the outside, they don't have the greatest release, but if you're a good creator after the catch, you're a good athlete, good hands, good route running, I'm kind of willing to find a spot for you. So I think it will depend on them, but I don't think any one on its own is necessarily a disqualifier from being a good receiver. Unless if you run a 4.9, then maybe we'll reconsider. But
Jake Bobo would like to have a word with you.
Yeah. No, I'm actually.
I think he's in a Super Bowl right now. If he's still in the Seahawks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Jack, I also want to say this was a really good idea for how to cover a position, because I'm sitting here and I'm learning new questions to ask, and like I'm intrigued, and I think I could probably go for a whole nother hour and just to keep the conversation going, and we're not going to do that, but I really like this idea, and I'm curious because like I see Newt in the chat, and Newt podcasts with Owen every Wednesday. Like, Owen, had you done a topic like this before?
We've done similar things, and we're going to be doing one for running backs this coming Wednesday. Me and Newt are, where we are breaking down traits, but it's more so list your top 3 players in those traits, as opposed to mix and matching the different traits and building one exclusive player from traits from individual guys. So I haven't done exercise like this before, but it's definitely one that I've seen like ESPN and do it. Like the quarterback Frankenstein is usually the most famous one.
Yeah, like when you and Newt do like offensive line, breaking down offensive line like this, like I think I would learn a few things about like your grading scales and why one player might be considered higher for somebody else. Like, because that's among the things that I'm getting from this is that if somebody's really high on, let's say, Elijah Surratt over everybody else, it's like you said, Owen, I think you're focusing on 5 traits, even though they lack a 6th. And anybody that dislikes the fact that that receiver's that high might be emphasizing that 6th trait.
That's, I think, what says so much about rankings. And the more you talk to guys who are kind of watching tape, you realize a lot of the time you see a guy completely the same, but you value that skill set differently. And I think that so often comes to where rankings differ. Like, I think Owen and I see Surratt similarly, but I'm lower on him. But that's not because I think we've seen necessarily different things. And I'm sure there's guys on my board that'll be higher that Owen will be lower on because of where you value and what you put value in. And I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to value these things. But I think that's often interesting because I think sometimes people go, you always hear things, especially on Twitter, like, you didn't watch the tape. It's like a lot of the time people do watch the tape. They just have different conclusions because they value different skill sets. And I think that's what makes these discussions really interesting.
And that's when Darrell Jackson Jr. gets in your top 50, right, Jack?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas Brian hated that. Whereas, for me, but again, it comes down to what you value. Like run stuffing nose tackles. Me and Brian were like, on Caden McDonald, like there was a lot of back and forth there, where it's like, well, where do you value a trait like that? See the guy completely the same, but it's where you value it. And I think that's
where do you have McDonald?
Like kind of back end of the first round.
Okay, where does he?
I think Brian was probably like midday 2, I think.
So I'm also in the midday 2 because it's like you're saying, like that's a great example because absolute beast in the middle of stopping the run, but that's only like 1 or 2 factors of a 10-factor scale that I'm working with, and it's like I in my scale I've to kind of spice them up and make it different than others because I've kind of stolen mine and picked pieces from other people's. But for me, what I did to kind of differentiate it, so it's 10 scales on a scale range of 10. But for each position, I've gone through and taken the one skill I think is the least important to early success or at least success overall, kind of what we're talking about in this conversation, taking 1 point off the max from that and giving it to the skill set that I think is the most. So, for example, with my 10 skills we went over for earlier, my grading scale with wide receivers, I took 1 point off of route running. The title of it used to be route running variety, which is just like the different types of routes you can run. And added that more to separation because I value like there are guys who are going to get open without being elite route runners through physicality or through deep speed or through other things that help you out there, which I think helps out players like a Carnell Tate, where I don't think he's like the most technical, refined route runner, but he creates separation. And so if some people will be like, but he's such an elite route runner. I'm like, I can't max out the scale past the 9. Like if he's got max there, but he's deficient at other places, I'm not going to be as high on him for other places. And sometimes it helps me out and sometimes it bites me in the ass. Sometimes it helps me out with players like that are like everyone's so high in their athleticism, they're ignoring the rest of their game. And then I miss on, I'm like, but I don't think they're going to make it. Or you miss on a player like Brian Thomas Jr., who I had in like the 3rd round. So like that's where they can kind of come back. But that's also just the nature of the draft where you can value other things. And some guys show one thing on tape and other people are like, well, I bet he can fix that in the NFL. And you're like, I don't know how easily he can fix that in the NFL. And then he either does or doesn't. And then that is a whole different ball game.
So, Jack, where did you end up on DeMonte Capehart?
Where's Capehart for me? He was. Where are you? Here he is. My 13th defensive tackle, kind of like 4th round, like
You see, that's what I mean. Like, because I think you're with Owen there. Owen's not going to quit Capehart.
No, you want to talk about run stuffing nose tackles that have a little bit of athleticism in them. I'm there with DeMonte Capehart.
So, So, like, again, Jack, I learned a lot about how to maybe position some podcasts with just, there's, 40 regular podcasters here at the Draft Professor. I learned a lot from you saying, hey, let's cover wide receivers this way. So I appreciate you stepping up and saying, like, Jim, here's how I want to cover something. And I'm sitting here along for the ride, and this was a really good show. With that being said, Jack, do you want to let everybody know about your social media and the other podcasts that you do?
Yeah. So all my stuff generally, well, most of my stuff's on Twitter. I'm trying to get as much film clips out as I can at the moment, as I'm just trying to grind the tape as fast as I can before the draft. You can also find my work over at the Touchdown, which is the UK's biggest NFL and NFL draft site. We've got prospect interviews coming up. We've got mock drafts. We've got our perfect pick series. So anything that way, go over there. And then I'm working on the Touchdowns draft guide at the moment, which is coming together slowly but surely. But that came out last year and was probably like 500 pages worth of stuff. I'm hoping we'll get maybe 600 pages this year. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then Cheesehead TV draft guide. As a Packers fan, I'm doing kickers because as a European, we know something about kicking a ball. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So for me, I'm sure you're going to throw that to me next, Jim. I'm over on Twitter and YouTube at Weekly Huddle. I have been ramping up and doing some more live streams where I'm live watching tape. The other night we did running backs, got through an updated grade on Jonah Coleman, got my first eyes on Mike Washington Jr. Was going to do one yesterday, but work kind of knocked me out. So maybe tonight, probably more tomorrow. So there'll be some days where I'm on and I'll keep posted. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to find that real quick when I'm going to be going live. But other than that, I'm here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays covering the draft. Tuesdays is more of a Buffalo Bills Center podcast with me, Jim, Randall is another draft professor, and then former Buffalo Bills offensive lineman Jerry Ostrowski are on at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays, and at 9 p.m. Western time or Eastern time on Wednesdays. I'm with Newt on talking about a bunch of different stuff, and we have guests on all the time. We just did a dramatic.
Well, you see, and every once in a while, Owen's feed goes out. That's not the first time that's happened with Owen.
He's
got to get better internet in his attic. But Owen, you can find him at the Weekly Huddle. He's at Draft Professor every Tuesday and Wednesday. And then he is a great fill-in. Sometimes you'll see Owen on Fridays. He filled in here for Devin Jackson on Sunday. And Owen is also a former scout at the University of Buffalo. So even if you go back to earlier in this podcast, where it's fascinating listening to Owen about how much, because when you're scouting at the college level for recruiting, you don't watch as much tape as you do for the draft. Like Owen has explained to me, he'll watch 5 plays of a player and decide if they're going to recruit him or not.
Wow.
So, yep. So There we go. So Owen, I gave you the plug about how college recruiting is different than scouting for the draft, but go ahead and finish your plug.
Yeah, I was so excited because I was about to hit on the fact that I'm also writing for Cheesehead TV for their interior offensive line section for the first time this year. So I didn't know Jack was writing for the kickers. I'm excited to read that part because that's the one area that I'm totally blind on for recruiting and drafting and stuff like that. So check that out when it does get published closer to the draft. But yeah, that's about it. I got cut off right at the end.
I'm glad that you mentioned Cheesehead TV because I completely forgot about that. But Newt Weston, the head of the Cheesehead TV guy, is in the chat. So Newt, thank you so much for stopping by. I want to thank all the draft professors for stopping by. There were several of you here. Anthony, you're here nearly every day. It is great to see you. So thank you. Want to remind everybody that we have a 32-person mock draft on Friday. So if you would like to draft for your team against the other draft professors, go to Draft Professors X page at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. The pinned post is the sign up. Drop your name on the pinned post in the replies. I will get in touch with you. With that being said, for the 100 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Jack, Owen, myself, all the draft professors in the chat, enjoy your Sunday. I am a Seahawks fan for the next day. Enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday, everybody, and we will see you on a podcast again in 15 minutes. Thank you.